what I've seen this last week, as part of our 39th wedding anniversary last weekend, Rudy and I spent an afternoon downtown getting a tourist's eye view of our city. And we took an hour-long bus ride on a big red double-decker bus. But since we've been living in San Antonio for so much of our lives, none of the sites were really new to us, but we took it as an opportunity to see them with new eyes, to see things like we'd never seen them before. And afterwards, as we spent some time walking downtown and on the river walk, keeping our focus on this new experience we were having, one of the things that I saw that really caught my attention was a giant chalkboard. I want to say it's 15 by 15 square feet, but it could be even bigger than that, on the wall of Playland, which is a Playland Pizza, a restaurant downtown on Houston Street. And for the past 28 years, in the circle, we have been exploring this ever-evolving new story of co-creative spirituality through a variety of expressions, through meditation and poetry and music and dance. And here on this board was this clear, concise description of that new story and how and what it's about. It was well worded, and it was a timely reminder during these turbulent times. So I wanted to share it with you. And as I did in the Around the Circle. And if you don't receive our Around the Circle weekly e-newsletter and you'd like to, just shoot us an email and we'll get you signed up. So these are instructions for use for adapting to our state of constant change. Number 1, begin with the premise that everything exists. Number 2, we're all showing up in the middle of everyone else's story. Number 3, listen more than you talk. Number 4, it's complicated. Big things like existence and existence's constantly shifting redefinition tend to be complicated, and that's okay. Number 5, it's not just the product, but also the process. In fact, it's always been a process. Number 6, the discomfort is part of learning. And number 7, despite our being apart, we're all in this together. So the restaurant owners who created this sign, they, like so many of us, restaurant owners, business owners, individuals, are caught up in this mystery, that we're facing now about how to survive these changes at this time of COVID-19. How we can balance safety and economics and personal relationships with our own well-being and the well-being of our communities. So it's also interesting to note that this restaurant is on a block of buildings that have smashed windows and are still covered by plywood in the aftermath of the recent protest demonstrations. So this, to me, all feels like a reflection of the questions that I am facing in my life and the life of the Celebration Circle community. How do we navigate the economic and the social restrictions in this time of quarantine? And what changes are we being asked to make as our society reevaluates racial and social justice? So I believe that the story of conscious co-creation that we talk about in the circle and these instructions for use for adapting to our state of constant change offer us some really helpful clues. So first, let's talk about the premise that everything exists, because if we didn't start there, where would we be? And start with this, an invitation to accept things as they are, not meaning that we have to like them, that we can't or won't work to change things. But first, it's important to acknowledge and accept that everything and everyone exists just as they are. And no one and nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything is in relationship with everyone and everything else. And quantum physics and our advanced kind of understanding of this physical world that we're in have shown us that everything from the vast galaxies to the tiniest atom is in fact not a thing, but a process, a constantly changing story of interrelationships, whether we see it between stars or subatomic particles or nations or neighbors. We all exist in this ever-evolving stew of relationships. And when we talk about the existence of things and constant change, things get complicated. So it's really no surprise that we're showing up in each other's stories. Moving forward is a messy and mysterious process because it involves a web of relationships. And it also gets a lot messier if I think that my story is more important than your story, or if I think that my group is right and your group is wrong. That's why it's important to listen more than you talk. Why it's important for me to let go of my attachment to my story and listen as you tell yours. To open to this great mystery, this mystery of the questions, of the unknown, to loosen my grip on my version of how things should be, and the need to tell you my answers. And it also asks me to allow for silence to emerge, to resist the urge to fill the space with my answers and my experiences, to allow for this time to sit, to breathe, to feel into it. Change is challenging and messy and complicated. So sit, take a breath, and feel into it. And again, take a breath. And feel into it. There was a respected Buddhist teacher who had just finished his Dharma talk. And he was taking questions when a student said, "I've been listening to your lectures for years, but I just don't understand. Could you just please put it in a nutshell? Can you reduce Buddhism to one phrase?" Oh, of course, everyone laughed and the teacher laughed. And then the teacher said, "Everything changes." And then he asked for another question. So the important teaching in Buddhism that everything in life is impermanent can be summed up in the teacher's phrase, everything changes. It also reminds me of that old jazz song, everything must change. Nothing stays the same. Everyone will change. No one stays the same. The young become the old, and mysteries do unfold. But that's the way of time. No one and nothing goes unchanged. And then he says, there are not many things in life one can be sure of, except rain comes from the clouds, sun lights up the sky, hummingbirds fly. So everything must change, and everything does change. And why is it important? Why is this awareness of change and impermanence? Why does it matter? Because it teaches us that holding on to things is one of the major reasons why we suffer. This is our opportunity to live in the awareness of this constantly changing nature of reality and to appreciate this present moment. And it's not about letting go. It's not really about holding on. If we could learn to live in this awareness, then we can find peace in each moment. And the discomfort is part of the learning. And that's okay, because we are talking about a constantly changing process, not just coming up with some product, some end result. Maria Montessori, the well-known educator, based her evolutionary approach to education on the idea of it's the process, not the product. And what she meant, I think, for this is that children, when they're in the process of learning, they're in full joy. And it's easy for them because they haven't been conditioned to value the product over the process. So a 3-year-old can spend time drawing and painting and be absolutely in the moment and then completely toss it aside and never think about it again. But for us as adults, doesn't the frustration, the discomfort come from when we mess up? And what is messing up but just a different outcome from the expectation when we think what it is supposed to be, what's supposed to happen, what the outcome is supposed to be. So if we are allowed, or if we allow our children and ourselves to be in this process rather than focused on the outcome, if we let the messing up be part of the expectations, then things would be less frustrating. We'd have less discomfort, less suffering. So imagine just for a moment the process of a young one learning to walk. They get up and move forward, or maybe not, and fall down. And then they repeat. And then they start over again and again. And yes, there is discomfort in the falling, but only if we judge it. Falling is okay. And when we fall, when we forget, it's helpful to surround ourselves with people and resources to help us remember who we truly are. We're not a lonely, static, separate person stuck in an old story, but we are eternal beings. We are this ever evolving story of becoming connected to other beings, other stories, other possibilities. And despite being apart physically, we are all in this together. And it's more important to listen than to talk.